there was over 1,000 tapes there. There was no paperwork. All I had to go by was what was on the tape itself. So if it was a beta or a 3/4 inch or a VHS, I would throw it in a box, 100 tapes at a time or so, get in a cab, go down to 11th Ave to the Metropolitan Library Council studio, which they rented to me for $5 an hour, and I could just watch and audition tapes. And if it was a format I couldn't play, like a digibeta or an open reel tape, if it looked interesting, had an interesting copy on the label, it went into a box and it went to Media Preserve, and hopefully I'd get something cool back in the mail in a couple months. So I'm generating at this point tons of digital metadata and just digital media files. So I had to quickly come to terms with how to organize this stuff. We came up with a pretty simple file naming convention based on events, because almost everything in the collection is based on events. So this is a show we did earlier in the year. The naming convention is just year, month, date. A means it's an Apollo show, R would mean it's a rental, quick description, and then just format codes, program booklets, PG, IB documents, photography, PO. They don't teach you how to do numbering systems in library school, but this has worked out okay so far. Started a local server where I was serving this stuff, just storing it all, and then built a very crude digital preservation scheme on the back of a piece of foam board. It just basically means there's 3 places where everything is, and we'll migrate the drives every couple of years. So once this data was in a somewhat manageable state, we started a collective access instance, which I'm sure some people here are familiar with. It's great for multiple media formats. We use it mostly as a content management system. It only has our access files in it. It doesn't have massive preservation files, but it also contains our performance history info. And now all of a sudden, if somebody came to me and said, "What do you have about the Temptations?" I'd go to like the photo spreadsheet and the video spreadsheet and the gig spreadsheet and now I can just type Temptations into collective access. I can see when they played here, posters, photos, videos. It's just been a lifesaver, and it went online in late 2019, so it allowed me to do my job from home when the world briefly ended. So now that this stuff is a little bit more at our fingertips, we've been trying to find uses for it. We use archival material in our education programs. We revamped our school tours using content that we had access to. We're creating original programming based on archival materials. This series, Live Wire from the Archives, we've done 2 installments. It's on our website, and then a 3rd is coming out very soon. We're collaborating with other institutions. We did a program with the Armstrong House and Town Hall about Armstrong's journey from the Apollo to Town Hall. We did a hip-hop fashion thing with FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. We use archival content on social media all the time. We enrich the in-theater experience with archival materials. I'm taking part in all the community outreach I can to see if anybody in Harlem still has a ticket stub or a flyer or anything that I can scan and give back to them, or they can donate it, that's fine. As we commission new work, we invite the artists into the archives to do research and inform their creations. And probably most importantly, we're open to taking research questions. We don't really have, our database is not online yet. That's part of our long-range plan, but there are a lot of privacy and copyright issues we need to wade through. But if you call my office with a question, I will get back to you, maybe not the same day, but within a couple of days. And that's really been the most enriching part of it, is just helping not only researchers and scholars and fans, but a lot of people who performed at the Apollo themselves or had family members who had done so. It's been incredibly moving to help people rediscover something about themselves and where they came from through the Apollo archives. And I'm also just actively collecting materials. I've had some great donations. I'm out there at the flea markets every weekend. We found some cool stuff. Down in Atlanta, I found a bunch of documents from Phil Walden's estate, who was Otis Redding's manager, and a bunch of other great R&B singer's manager before he went on to do like the Allman Brothers. Found a bunch of papers from his estate. The other day on eBay, there was this envelope of old photo negatives that just said like Apollo Theater, Ray Charles on it, and I got it for $20 and started scanning, and Yeah, there are photos of like Mickey and Sylvia on stage at the Apollo in 1957 that nobody had seen before. There's photos of Ray Charles on the stage. And that, I consider that orphan work. I think we can exploit that. I wanted to show a few highlights of cool things I found. I'll get to that in a second, but just condensing 5 years into 20 minutes is pretty tough. But I think these are the big takeaways for me being in this role and going through this and making the mistakes I made and having the successes whatever modest successes I've had. You can't exist in isolation. I've drawn a lot from this community at ARSC, from my professional community in New York, and from the people who bring research questions to me. Most of the time I end up learning stuff that I incorporate into the collection. So you think of an archivist as being in a back room, just tending to the collection and not talking to anybody. That's just not how it works. Don't get hung up on digital versus physical. I know this is a room of collectors and we all like stuff, and I love stuff, but I was at the Brooklyn Academy of Music with their archivist, Louis Fleck, who's fantastic, and he was showing me his eBay searches and something came up and he was like, I'll never be able to afford that, and then he just grabbed the JPEG and dropped it in the database.
Yeah.
It's like, done. Yeah. It's not going to get you all the way there, but it gets you a long way. So I have a lot of stuff in our database that we don't have in the collection. Dealing with the myth versus reality of the Apollo archives, people think, oh, you've been around since 1934, so you must have photos and videos of every show that ever happened. And that's just, it was a working theater through 1977. These guys were trying to get people paid and get shows on and get people in the seats. I've heard too many stories about what the previous owners have thrown away. It just makes the things you have that much more precious. And I'm adjusting to that, and I spend a lot of time kind of letting people down who might think we have more than we do. Constantly educating the institution, advocating for the collection. I do a lot of presentations for donors, for staff members. I didn't realize quite how much advocacy work would be involved, but it's been really fun. As you all know, rights are messy. My process here was digitize, preserve, catalog, and we'll get to the rights later, because some of this stuff is vulnerable, and it's really case-by-case basis with the stuff we have. And yeah, we exist to serve. We're not saving this stuff so that it doesn't get touched or damaged. It needs to be out there, it needs to be used, and it needs to be referenced. And all right, with that in mind, I'm going to quickly show you a couple of my favorite things that I've encountered in this journey. The first is the work of Gordon Anderson. He was the staff photographer at the Apollo from the early 50s through the mid 60s. Amazing behind the scenes photos. That's Gordon with Billie Holiday backstage at the Apollo. Here's Sam Cooke and Dinah Washington backstage. And if you've read any music bios about this kind of music from this era, you've probably seen his collages. These turn up in a lot of biographies, but Gordon would make these and sell these to the performers as a souvenir of their Apollo memory. And he donated a bunch of stuff before he passed away, and I've since found a lot of his other work on the secondary market, and his family are actually here in Pittsburgh. I've been meeting with them since I've been here. And he also took 8mm footage, like this is Sammy Davis Jr. getting out of his car on 126th Street before a show. Another interesting thing that emerged was that when the theater was really hitting rock bottom in the 70s, Bobby Schiffman, the owner-operator, had this idea to do a regional television special. Yeah. It's been written about, but it hasn't, I think this is the only, Ted Fox, who wrote the book about the Apollo, said this is the only copy he's heard of. It aired locally in 1976. It was called Showtime at the Apollo, not to be confused with the one that started in '87. This is the trailer for that.
Put on your dancing shoes and get your soul together. It's showtime at the Apollo.
It's a great time capsule. Music, fashion. And we had the whole special, but we also had the promo. Then when Percy Sutton bought the theater in the early 80s, he did extensive renovations. We found tapes in the storage unit of just people walking around during the renovations, which I think his contribution to the theater tends to get overlooked, but he spent $8 or $10 million doing this work, and just having this kind of visual documentation has been incredibly helpful for us. He also had this vision of creating an Apollo TV channel, which he pitched to cable providers. Didn't end up happening, but we found his old promos that he made, which are pretty
You're watching Apollo Entertainment Television, the best looking sound around in stereo.
8 hours a day of exciting music and dance and lifestyles, 7 days a week.
Didn't end up happening, but he tried. One last thing that's really cool is there was this tape, this 3/4-inch tape. I was at the Metro Library Council, and it just said Harlem Renaissance Partnership Gala. Popped it in. It's like, oh, this looks like some sort of community banquet. There's the mayor, you know, and then the lights go out and the entertainment starts, and Cab Calloway comes out, and he's broken his hip, and he's seated in a director's chair, and he still gives a really radiant performance. And I started doing some research, and it was actually his final public performance, and it hadn't been seen, and it's shown to the end.
Very much straightly bridges. Put on a box back coat and a Stetson hat. Put a $20 gold piece on my chin. Then all the boys do, I die.
And one last thing, because we're with the keynote on Saturday, there was a hip-hop label called Cold Chillin' Records out in New York. They had like Roxanne Shante, MC Shan, Big Daddy Kane, Biz Markie, some really important early hip-hop artists. And they did 5 nights, did a 5-night showcase at the Apollo, which they filmed for a home video release. Those masters were then destroyed in a fire. The release never ended up happening. And we had safety copies in our storage unit that even the people who had commissioned it didn't know about. And so I got in touch with the copyright owners. We're going to do a screening in the fall. It's just a really incredible piece of early hip hop history that people really thought was lost. And I'll just show you a quick clip of Big Daddy Kane descending from the rafters of the Apollo in full regalia. Yeah, just an incredible document, and the guys who commissioned it were just so thrilled to see it. They've been coming to my office and watching. We have about 3 hours of footage, so we've been slowly working through it together, and I'm there with a pencil just taking notes so I can add all this metadata to it. But, all right, I think we have maybe 5 minutes for questions or so.
About.
If there are any questions, I'll do my best to take them, or you're welcome to email me with any more specific concerns anytime after this.